Hi guys. God, it's a warm one again. Right, so welcome to the first of my History Sunday, scheduled History Sunday videos. Now, this one I've chosen the subject of English surnames. Now, a lot of you may know or may have noticed that I am completely into English social history and how it pertains to, amongst other things, archery, but military as well. And one of the most easily noticeable and most commonly evidenced aspects of English social history is to be found in surnames. Now, there are three main types of surname. There are locational, familial, and occupational. I mean, there are others, but generally speaking, the vast majority of English surnames, or even British surnames, come from location, family, and occupation. So we'll start off with location. Now, if you have a surname which ends in B, BY, or BI, or BIE, or something like that, it basically means that your family comes from the area around a central location with a specific name. For instance, Bixby in Lincoln is a little town called Bix, and people who come from Bixby or have the surname Bixby come from the area by and around the town of Bix. If you come from Grimsby, the same thing. You come from, not necessarily in the town, but you come from the area in and around the area known as Grims. Now, Grimsby was probably originally named after a tribe, but if your surname is Grimsby, it means you come from that area. Hambley probably means that you come from an area around a town. Now, Hambley is a bit of an odd one because you're basically saying that the town was called Town and that you come from the area around the town that was called Town. So it can sometimes get a bit confusing. This is why non-English people, tourists coming to the UK, to England, to modern day England, have such problems with English place names. It can get quite complicated. Even for people living here, it can get complicated. But anyway, so carry on with the locational names. If you have a surname which ends in ton, it means that you were again, similar sort of thing to the by suffix. It means you come from somewhere, from a town. Like, for instance, the nearest one to me is Norton, which basically means the north or the north town, the town of the Northman. Now, Norton was recently, in the last 20 years, had a lot of archaeological work done, and it's been there for a long time. They unearthed Saxon, Anglo-Saxon, Viking, Danish, pre-Roman burial grounds and archaeology and all sorts. It's been there a long time. So if your name ends in ton, it means that you come from a town. For instance, the next one over, Stockton. Now, Stockton is Stock Town. And you might say, for instance, oh yeah, I am John from Stockton. Say you went on your travels, you went up to Newcastle or Durham. Somebody asks you who you are. I'm John from Stockton. That's where you get your surname from. You might be going back a few centuries, but that is how you would describe yourself. Another suffix for a place name is ham. For instance, if your name was Billingham, like for instance the town I live in, Billingham, ham means the home of, and the first part of it, Billing, basically means it's the home of Bill, the home of Billing. Now, some people say that it might have originally been Billingsham, but there is a town called Billingsham, so the chances are it isn't. So it's Billingham, the home of the Billing. Now, some people say it could be the Billingas, which was a tribal name, or it could be an individual, the leader of the tribe, Billing. Anyway, so that's like if you've got a name ending in ham, like Birmingham, Nottingham, Billingham, Evesham, somewhere like that. That's where your name comes from. It's because you are named after a town where you came from. So those are locational names. The next ones are familial or patronymic. You'd be named, as is a modern practice today, you would take the family name. A couple of hundred years ago, you would take your father's name. So for instance, if your father was called John, you might be John Johnson. You'd be John, the son of John. You're John's son, John. So the surname might stick, but it would make more sense if you, for instance, your name was William and you were the son of John, so you'd be William Johnson. Lots of familiar names. Like for instance, one that quite a lot of you may know is Windsor, the family name of our current royal family. Now the name Windsor has lots and lots of different meanings. For instance, when it comes from Devon and Cornwall, which is where one, depending on the spelling, it actually means you were again, it's a place name, but it's taken as a family name, and it basically means that you were from the side of a river or a lake. Another meaning of Windsor is somebody who was born in late winter. So there are lots of different derivations. Now the Windsor area that our royal family take their name from is the longest continually inhabited castle in England. That's where the royal family live today. That's their home, Windsor Castle. So there's another familial name. Williamson. You're named after, originally, especially in the medieval era, a lot of people took their names from William the Bastard, the Conqueror, the William the First. So they would name themselves after, or they would name their children after him. And then Williamson, or Williams, which is a diminutive of William's son, becomes Williams, and then even smaller becomes Wilson. So again, you are being named after, like Wilson is purely a family name. William's son is a patronymic name. But as it evolved into shorter and shorter versions. So there we have familial names. Now to get on to my own favourite part of this subject is the occupational names, of which there are thousands. I think at least 3/4 of the names in the English-speaking world, well, sorry, 3/4 of the names of the English surnames are occupational. The most common being Smith. It's the most common in the English-speaking world, actually. It's the most common surname in America. It's the most common surname in England. Smith. And basically, it's a very old name. It goes back to pre-Roman. And it takes its origins in the Celtic and the Old English, smite, the word to smite, as in to hit something. And that's what a smith does. Smiths were the guys who worked in metal. Now there are lots of different types. Swordsmith, blacksmith, goldsmith, silversmith, lots of different types of tinsmith, lots of different types of smith, all working in metal. Now if we take blacksmith for instance, you call it a blacksmith because most of the metals you work in, the finished product tends to be black. It ends up in the black, as opposed to a sword which would be polished and would end up in the white. So a swordsmith would work in the white, a blacksmith making gates and wrought iron fences and things like that would work in the black. Blacksmith. Now I have a pet theory as to why Smith is the most common name in England, America, Australia, places like that. And it's because, now if you think about this, every single little farming community, every single village, every single area where people gather together to form a community would have a blacksmith. And they worked constantly. They were probably usually the strongest, the fittest and the healthiest men in the village. And as such, they had more kids than anybody else because they could afford to feed them and raise them. So you might have a smith who would have 10 kids. They would all be trained up as smiths. Now if you take that over the 1,000 years from, even if we go post-Roman up until the Grand Exodus in the 15th, 16th centuries, where people left England and Europe for the New World, lots and lots and lots of people were called Smith. It's been the most common surname in England for millennia. Well, a couple of hundred years, a few hundred years, 1,000 years at least. So lots of Smiths emigrated and went to the New World. Lots of Smiths were sent to Australia as convicts, and so you end up with Smith being the most common name in those countries as well. Now that's just a theory. Couldn't prove that even if I wanted to, even if I tried. Occupational names, but there are some odd ones as well. For instance, farmer. Now everybody thinks of a modern day farmer as being somebody who works the land. This is true today. However, if you go back to the Dark Ages and early medieval, a farmer was actually a rent collector. A farmer was responsible for collecting the rents, and before the rent, for collecting the land taxes that land workers paid on their strip of land. The agriculture in medieval England, in early medieval England, was what was called ridge and furrow. Basically, you had a ridge of land, you planted on the top, then you had a furrow for drainage, and then a ridge and a furrow, and like that. You can still see evidence of that in our fields today. And land workers would actually work one ridge each. So you might have 20 ridges in a field. There'd be 20 people working those ridges, producing whatever, wheat, grains, potatoes, whatever. But the farmer was the guy responsible for all of those ridge and furrow strips in that field. That became the farmer's field, and he was responsible initially for collecting the taxes, the land taxes, and then when the taxation system changed after the Norman conquest, he would then be responsible for collecting the rents. So that's where the name farmer comes from. There's some others. Most of you, nearly all of you will know of the name Butler. Really common name. Now a butler, again occupational, was the head servant within a household. But there were other servants in the household as well. For instance, a bursar or a purser was the person responsible for paying the bills. I mean, the boss, the earl, the baron, whoever, he wasn't going to concern himself with mundane jobs like paying money to tradesmen. Somebody else would do that. That would be the bursar or the purser. And even today, a purser is a job title on ships, especially cruise ships and places like that, who handles wages, things like that. Next to him would be the purvis. Purvis, being a common English name, is the person who was responsible for the ordering of the everyday essentials necessary for the smooth, efficient running of the household. Again, and quite often, the purvis could actually be a female, and they were quite often either married to the butler or to the bursar. So there was a connection going on there, and he or she was responsible for ordering in, for instance, the foodstuffs they might need. Ordering in, if it like at this time of the year, we're getting into autumn, they might start ordering candles, enough to see them over the winter, for the long winter nights. They might start ordering in, they'd order in the food, the wine, all that sort of stuff. Make sure the family had enough blankets, and the servants, make sure there's enough blankets to go around to keep everybody warm. Make sure there was enough firewood ordered, or like from the local forest, and brought in ready to keep the family warm over the winter. So a purpose. So as you can see, it could be quite a complicated subject, and I could go on for hours and hours and hours on the subject of surnames. There are others as well, like nicknames. Like I touched on one in the Sling and Six. Like for instance, if your name is Bolt or Bolter, it's because at some point in the dim distant, a member of your family, an ancestor of yours, was described as being short, fat and dumpy, like a crossbow bolt, barrel-shaped, something like that. Today you might say fat as a pig. Back then you might have said you were as fat as a barrel, you were as round as a barrel, you were as round as a crossbow bolt, short, fat and dumpy. So the name might have stuck. One of the most common names, well, one of the most respected names in Scotland, one of the most powerful tribes in Scotland, sorry, not a tribe, a clan in Scotland, were the Campbells. Now, not many Campbells realise that their name actually comes from a nickname. I mean, back in the dim distant, and it basically there's two meanings to it. It comes from its etymology is Cam Buell, which basically means either crooked mouth or wry mouth. Wry as in dry sense of humour. you know, a bit smarmy, a bit snide. But anyway, but there's other meanings to it as well. If you called somebody a crooked mouth, you might be calling them a liar. So there's some thinking to be done there, but that's what I mean. Nickname, Campbell. At some point in the past, somebody has been called a cambule. Somebody has been called a crooked mouth, and it's stuck. And then as they've gone on and got married or had kids or whatever, that name has stuck. But then they've changed it around, and it's become quite a proud, honourable name now, Campbell, for the Campbell clan. So there's lots of little things like that to be looked into as well. Anyway, we won't go any further because I'm starting to rabbit. I could honestly go on about this for hours. Look up your own name sometime. You might be surprised at what it actually means and how old the name might actually be as well. Anyway, hope you found that interesting. Stay safe, keep swinging the sticks, and we'll talk again soon. Cheers, guys.